Have you ever wondered why some days your mind works at high speed and other times it feels like it's in slow motion, meaning your mind isn't completely under your control? Therefore, today we will talk about molecular biologists. From better memory to improving focus, this book provides a way to unlock your brain's hidden potential so that you can take your brain to the next level. So let's simplify science and start with the first rule. Rule number 1, the human brain. According to the evolve Dawkins theory of evolution, we became humans from monkeys, which took billions of years, but these changes were not only physical, our brain also evolved over time, meaning our brain has evolved for survival. It is designed to solve problems and stay alive in unpredictable environments. Initially, we had a lizard brain for basic functions like breathing. Whenever there is danger, the amygdala reacts. Then we develop the cortex, which is the powerful part of the human brain. It helps us in complex thinking, planning, and understanding others' thoughts and emotions. This evolution. Be a p a ban a movement is our brain's best friend. During evolution, our ancestors moved all day, they hunted and roamed, and this movement kept their brain sharp. In today's era, our sedentary lifestyle, why don't both be? When we exercise, our brain receives glucose and oxygen, which keep neurons alive and create new brain cells. Harvard psychiatrist John Grady says that exercise works like Miracle-Gro for your neurons, helps in growing and keeping plants healthy, just like exercise acts as a fertilizer for your brain's neurons. When you exercise, brain-derived neurotrophic factor in your brain. Rule number 3. Sleep well, think well. Sleep is king. When we sleep, our brain processes the day's information, sorts it, and converts it into memories worth remembering. Without sleep, your brain slows down. Your problem-solving skills and learning significantly enhance by up to 40% with proper sleep. It starts with New York DJ Peter Tripp, who hosted a marathon radio show for 200 hours without sleep. As a result, he began to hallucinate. His brain started showing incorrect images and scenarios. His mental state became so deteriorated that... Rule number 4. Stressed brains don't learn the same way. When we are stressed, our body goes into fight or flight mode, and chronic stress can damage important areas of your brain. Research says that it directly impacts your memory and learning abilities. This damage can be long-term, so managing stress is very important. This study shows that during stress, the neurons in our brain do not properly... In a famous experiment, a German Shepherd dog was given electric shocks, but even when it had the option to escape, it did not react. Because stress had damaged its brain so much that it froze. This is the impact stress has on our brain, which is why stress management techniques like mindfulness and exercise play a very important role. Number 5. Every brain is wired differently. Every person's brain is unique. We all think differently, learn differently, and all this is because of our brain wiring. The way you process information is due to... It evolves through personal experiences and learning. Neuroscientists have proved that when we learn new experiences and skills, our neurons form new connections. This process is called brain plasticity, which helps you continuously evolve and adapt. That's why every person's learning ability is different. Let's take the example of Michael Jordan. He was the greatest champion of basketball, but when he tried to make his career in baseball, he was not successful. Why? Because his brain was wired for basketball, but not for baseball. Every person's talent and learning capacity depends on their brain wiring. Rule number 6. We don't pay attention to boring things. Our brain only pays attention to things that are either interesting or emotional. Paying attention to boring things is a struggle for the brain because our attention span is limited. In today's time, where there are many distractions, our brain focuses only when something is emotionally engaging or exciting. Research shows that our attention span is around 10 minutes. If after that, you don't find something interesting or engaging, your brain starts to lose attention. To activate the brain's reward system, something exciting or emotional inputs are necessary. When you are sitting in a class or meeting and find something boring, you automatically zone out after 10 minutes. Many times we force ourselves to do tasks that are boring for us and then repeatedly fail in them. To avoid this, even those tasks need to be us pam ustor on con ar. When you have to remember something new, just reading or hearing it once is not enough. You have to repeat that information multiple times so that your brain stores it in long-term memory. Studies show that when you repeat something at spaced intervals, your memory improves. Your brain needs continuous exposure to form strong connections between neurons. This happens through spaced repetition, where you have to repeatedly revise things. Imagine you have to memorize a topic for an exam. If you read it only one day, you'll remember it in the short term but forget it in the long term. However, if you revise the topic little by little every 2 to 3 days, the brain will store it in long-term memory. Our brain processes information better the more senses it uses. When you experience the same thing through multiple senses like seeing, see, hear, or touch, then your brain stores that information better. That means the more senses you involve, the stronger the memory will be. In a study, people were given a list to memorize. When they were just read to, the results were average. But when they were shown the same information with visuals, that's why we remember the stories of movies and TV shows better, because we watch them. If you are only reading something, only a limited part of the brain is active. But when you see or hear it, more areas of the brain become active, making learning and memory more effective. And speaking of the most powerful sense, it is vision. Vision trumps all other senses. Our brain uses 50% of its energy just for visual processing when we want ki our sauce power When the brain sees something, it converts that visual into a story that is strongly stored in memory. Vision is called the supersense because visual learning is the most powerful way to remember information. An experiment. Subscribe, 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 subscribe. Subscribe, 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 subscribe. Subscribe, 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 subscribe. Subscribe, subscribe. Subscribe, 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 subscribe. Subscribe, 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 subscribe. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe.